Welcome students to the Introduction to Trends in Marketing in Marketing 3337. This session is intended to introduce the class to trends and happenings in the area of global business and marketing that will set a stage for the majority of what we covered this semester in the class. So the idea here is to talk a little bit about what we're seeing in business in general, how it applies to marketing and the marketing function. And in particular, we're going to also talk about things that have been happening in regard to the COVID crisis, since that's particularly salient at this point. So I look forward to talking to you about this and setting the stage for the class from this particular session. So one of the first things that going into this crisis, prior to it, there was a study that was done. And this study really looked at what are some of the biggest trends and biggest challenges that C-suite, that is top executives and companies, are facing right now. So what is it that they're facing, and how are they thinking? What are the most important things for the future for their organizations? This actually was done by McKinsey, which is one of the world's largest consulting firms, and it was just done just before the COVID crisis. And one of the things that they found was that 86% of chief financial officers and 72% of other C-suite, that is senior executive officers like CEOs, chief executive officers, chief information officers, all of the C-suite executives found that the number one task that they were looking for their organization was finding new sources of growth, both organic and inorganic. Now, when we talk about new sources of growth, what we're talking about is being able to actually grow our company. That is actually there. One of the things that we distinguish in business is we talk about top line and bottom line growth. Top line growth is when we grow revenue. So we grow the total revenue that the money the company brings in and generates. Bottom line growth is where we grow profitability for the company. So one of the things that the focus is here is to really drive growth from an organizational perspective, that is continue to grow as a company. Now that growth challenge has continued over time, and we'll talk about how that's such an important shift for organizations. If we look at the number two most important thing, it's balancing long-term strategy for growth with short-term strategy for earnings and investors. Now that's really interesting, because what that says is that a lot of times we are trying to, if we're a public company, what we're trying to do is balance the strategy of growing over time. And a lot of when we grow over time, it's like capturing new customers, enhancing our markets, introducing new and innovative products. A lot of these things, a lot of these strategies take our investment of resources as a company. So we have to invest in advertising, sales functions, research and development, things like this. Those investments cost us money and cost us effort. And as a result of those expenditures, we're bringing down our profitability. So it goes a little bit against the immediate goal of being able to hit growth. So if what you're doing is you're looking at the long-term goal of the company, that is to grow in the long run, we need to invest in the short run. But the challenge is many CEOs want to be able to make the company look as good as possible in the short run. So it's a challenge. It's a bit of a battle between the short run and the long run objectives of the organization, which makes for a very interesting setting for organizations, because companies are struggling to be able to grow, yet at the same time make their numbers for the stock market, be able to make those numbers and make investors happy because they've made profits. So one of the things that we know, and this is over time, we see, and this is actually has continued up until, and we'll see the numbers after the crisis, but my guess is that the numbers remain fairly steady. But if we look at this, as we look at R&D spending, we see R&D spending 2007 all the way to 2017, and actually it continues into 2018 and 19. These are some of the numbers that PricewaterhouseCoopers, one of the big accounting and consulting firms, came out with. And what these are is what we call global innovation R&D spend in billions of dollars. So we know that the amount of money that's spent in billions in research and development of new products and new services that could enter the market continue to increase year over year over year. So companies continue to invest more and more and more money each year in being able to innovate, bring new and innovative products to the marketplace. These numbers I've seen also continue into 2018 and 19, and we'll see where they are in 2020. And you know, one of the interesting things is the only year that we see here in this trend is 2010, where we saw a little bit of a decrease. So we see here from 2010, we see a decrease specifically from 2009 to 10. We see this here. So that decrease right there was what we call the global financial crisis, and that happened in recession occurred during that time period. But what we immediately saw is a rebound in the immediate following period, and those numbers continued to go up over time. In fact, up until today. So we'll see when these numbers are reported in 2020 whether companies continue these research and development spends. My guess is we get a little bit of a dip going into this next year, but then we start to get gains again as we climb out of recession territory as an organization for most companies. So the interesting thing is, as we move forward on this, the interesting thing is to really think about why companies, so these companies are spending all this money on research and development, all this money on trying to bring out new and innovative products to the marketplace, trying to make themselves effective and innovative and things like this. So how are they, when we ask them how good they are at commercializing? When we talk about commercializing, that is bringing new products to the marketplace. So when we think about new product development in any company, one of the things that you'll learn as you go through the business school is that new product development typically goes through 4 focal phases. The first is the ideation phase. That is where the ideas are generated about the products within the organization. Somebody has to come up with these excellent ideas about what they can bring to the marketplace. We'll actually have a whole session about idea generation for organizations and products and services. The next is after the ideas are generated, they take all those ideas and they determine which products they're going to select out of those ideas to advance and invest in for the development of those products. After that, they go to the product development process where they actually build and engineer those products to be able to make them a reality in the marketplace. And then after that, what you see is the interesting thing is the final thing that they do in this process is engagement with customers to prove real world feasibility. And in fact, that's the highest rated thing right here out of everything. That's the highest rated. So companies believe they're very good, and these ratings are how good are you at each of these things. So the companies believe they're very good at engaging with customers to prove real world feasibility. But then what happens when they actually bring it to the final stage? This commercialization is when they launch these products and they bring them to market and sell them and market them into the marketplace. The executives believe that that is the area where companies do the worst. Look at that giant gap between here in product development and then what we see down here in actually rolling out that product. So when at some point, when we go from actually developing that product down here to commercializing it and bringing it to market, we see a huge decline in our ability to do so. And that's very challenging. And that really gets to the marketing and sales function of organizations. So companies have to be really good at marketing and selling their products, or else they're not going to be able to get success when they enter the marketplace. They can come up with awesome products, but without marketing and sales effectiveness, they can't be successful. And that's what we see here on what we call the commercialization gap. I just wrote a Harvard Business Review article about this last year, and it became a very actually well-known article out there in the field. So if you're interested in reading it, I'll put a link to that as well on our Blackboard page. So one of the things that I want to sort of think about a little bit is I want you to think about this question, which is organic growth. Remember, organic growth is growing within our company. That is having our company grow itself out, be able to get itself more effective, grow the bottom line. Remember, and that is, so we want the company to become more profitable and bring in more revenue and total bottom line and top line growth. over time. And we have to think about why companies are using the strategy and what actually is this strategy for moving forward. So I want to talk about why is this the number one thing that companies are thinking about now? Why this organic growth, and why is it so important to firms? So I want you to think about that a little bit. Think to yourself, why would, if you ask a CEO or a president of a company, if you ask them, why is organic growth the objective that you're focused on? That is growing your business year after year. Why not other things like make yourselves more efficient, or more effective at what you're doing, or trimming out fat from your organization, that is the difficult or complexities. There's lots of strategies. We'll talk about that some. But why is organic growth really the focal area for companies? Now, I want to talk about the changing pace and times, and this gets at that question of, and you'll see this evolution that's taken place. So for those of you who don't really know the trends and the way business have worked over the last, say, 30 years, I want to take a second to talk about this shift in business strategy that's happened over time. So if we went back 30 years ago, if we went to companies and we asked them, and we asked the same questions about senior executives, what is the most important thing in your organization? That was called the era of efficiency. So at that time, there was, if you can actually look up books on this, like there's a famous CEO, his name was Jack Welch from GE. Very famous at the time, sort of one of the heroes in business. And also there are a number of other people who talked about this concept of efficiency. So in business schools around the country, in companies around the world, what people talked about are things like systems reengineering. That means making things really super efficient in the company. Process management, that's making our processes really perfect. Downsizing, that is reducing the size of our employees or our staff to bring down our costs, to make ourselves super efficient as a company. And what we call this is the area of efficiency. So during the era of efficiency, the functions in the company that were super important to us, and in business schools at the time, were a concept of industrial engineering. These are people who are engineers that looked at process and scheduling and all these types of things to be able to make people more efficient. So industrial engineers, people that focused on engineering and efficiency, and they ended up being some of the senior leaders of companies. Now we shift 15 years forward, like 15 years ago, and what we saw is companies started to move to a new strategy, and that was what we call the era of acquisition. They moved away from this era of efficiency. So in fact, during the era of efficiency, the idea was, why don't we just always fire each year? Jack Welch talked about, why don't we just fire the bottom 10% of our employees, just get rid of them each year, make ourselves more efficient. And then moving forward, they said, you know what, we had different strategies. The CEOs, they started to think about a new strategy called the era of acquisition. And this is when larger companies started to take over smaller companies. Companies started to merge, both what we call upstream and downstream, as well as vertical and horizontal mergers. So what we actually find is that companies were becoming more effective by thinking to themselves, we're going to buy innovation externally. So this is a lot of what you saw in Silicon Valley with all the tech companies. So these little tech companies would come up with super creative ideas, and then the big companies would acquire the little companies, bring all their ideas in and start to sell them and make them more effective. And also big companies were coming together to make themselves more powerful in the marketplace, or even companies were looking what we call downstream to be able to, so a company, for example, that sold service products or for restaurants was acquiring restaurants to be able to actually distribute their products through that service chain. So this is what we call the era of acquisition. And what happened? Takeovers, mergers, leverage buyouts during this period. And that happened up to like 5 or 6 years ago. This was really the dominant strategy. And what we saw is many companies actually got blocked over time from this. So in the recent years, there's been a lot of stops from these mergers. And what they see is they don't want companies to dominate the marketplace by not having any competition. So the government actually has been stepping in and stopping a lot of these mergers. In fact, here in Houston, A couple that got stopped recently in the last couple of years is many of you might know one of the biggest employers in Houston is called Cisco Foods. They're a food distributor company. They tried to do a buyout of one of the other biggest food companies, US Foods, and bring them together to dominate the market, and the government put a block on it. Another one that occurred was in the oil field services industry. We saw that Halliburton and Baker Hughes, two of the big powerhouses there, tried to come together, and the government sort of blocked them coming together on it. So what we're seeing, and this is happening a lot, is this blockage, but also companies are saying, wow, we're not really realizing the value of these acquisitions externally like we did. We need to bring our own new products and our own ideas. We need to stop worrying about taking in others. And so that's how they move to what we call the era of organic growth. So this acquisition become less trendy. During that period, who are the powerhouses and C-suite people that were during finance managers, accountants, those types of people that were financial asset related people looking at those mergers and acquisitions. They were the powerhouses during that period. But moving forward in the era of organic growth, the big dominant players are research and development people, so engineering and research and development, sales, the marketing function. Why? Because they have to be able to focus in on this idea of growing the company. That's selling, commercializing, like we talked about a second ago. That's why commercialization is so critically important. So we've moved 30 years ago, era of efficiency, 15 years ago, era of acquisition, and then today we have the era of organic growth. And that's why it's so important. And in fact, we're going to even see during the COVID time period, we still see a sustained focus on organic growth. I'm going to show you some data around that in a minute. So when we talk about this concept of organic growth, I want to define it a little better so everyone understands, because we're going to be reflecting on this throughout the semester. This is a quote from The Economist. Business strategists are turning to organic growth as outselling the competition becomes the new success mantra for leading companies, for many leading companies. So what this is saying is that really what they're doing is they're saying the way we can be successful is this concept of organic growth. And so I want to explain what it is to achieve organic growth, just to define it really, really clearly. So organic growth is the process of business expansion, so expanding your business by increasing output from the company's existing business. That is, from taking what we currently are able to do and make ourselves even more effective, so we don't have to go outside and acquire another company. We don't have to go do these mergers and acquisitions or buy things and new products from outside or buy it into the marketplace. We can do it ourselves. We build it up. And so what do we want to do to achieve organic growth? The first is building market share. So market share is the percentage of total customers, business, that we own as a company. So if there are 3 competitors in the marketplace, and these 3 competitors are equally as big and selling an equal amount of product, we would say that each of them has a 1/3 market share. So 33%, 33%, 33%, they're equal market shares. Now, in a situation where one company dominates the market, let's say they have 80% of the market, and they sell 80% of all the products out there and the dollars, that would be 80% market share. So one of the things that we want to do is build market share by taking the most, not every business, all the business out there in the market, but just the most profitable business. So we want to take the customers away from our competitors that are the ones that are willing to pay premium for our products. So we want the most valuable customers in the marketplace. That's one way of building organic growth. The next way of building it, like we've been talking about, is creating and selling innovative products and services to the marketplace. So we have to develop and generate new ideas, new products, new things to the marketplace, and sell them out there to the market and make ourselves as effective as possible and commercialize those products to the marketplace. So that's how we see so many companies are famous because of innovation companies. If we think about innovation, we think about companies like Apple, who have historically been innovators. we're always looking for new things coming out in the marketplace, and us as consumers are ready for new stuff really rapidly. And so we're becoming more and more our higher expectations in what companies produce. So these are the two ways: building market share and creating innovative solutions to be able to expand our organization or build what we call organic growth. So what are the biggest drivers of organic growth? And I want to talk about some of these challenges in the marketplace that are happening now. One of the things we're going to talk quite a bit about is that the average company has more than twice as many competitors as it had 5 years ago. So a lot of companies are actually finding that the competition has increased in the marketplace, not decreased. And why is that? If we think about a typical US company that was doing business 5, 10 years ago, they had fewer competitors. And why do they have more now? Because of globalization. Because before, if consumers were only buying from companies that were distributing in the US, it's become easier to distribute in the US because of distribution systems and delivery systems and shipping efficiencies and things like this. And also through platforms like Amazon that have allowed companies to get access to markets that people haven't before. So there's so many ways in which we can buy from smaller companies and competitors out there. So a typical company has more competitors than ever before. The next thing we know is that market share of the average company is actually halved. That is that many companies have found that market share, that percentage of all the business that they have, has actually shrunk over the last 5 to 10 years. Because of all these new competitors coming in the marketplace, they're taking away their business from them. So it's becoming an even more challenging time period. And the last, and probably one of the most important areas, is that customers today, and you probably know this for yourselves, can access more than 20 times more information on products and services than they could 5 to 10 years ago. So we can go on the internet and we can self-educate about products and services. We can learn about all the different options that are out there. If we look 10 years ago and we were looking to buy something, we may actually have to go into a store to look at that stuff or just do a little bit of exploration online. But now what we're seeing is there's just so much volume in search engines and information online that it makes it even more competitive for companies now. So these are some challenging times. So the average company has twice as many competitors. The market share has become halved. And then we also see that customers are more educated and more advanced than they ever have been before. Now, one of the things that we know by exploring the data is that companies that do achieve this organic growth, that is, companies that are the most successful firms. So we looked at the revenue growth of the top S&P 500 firms. So if we look at the Standard & Poor's 500 firms, top 500 firms, and we compared the bottom third of performers, the middle performers, and the top performers, one of the things that we see is that this is by the amount of growth they achieved. So in the bottom, we'll see this is the amount of growth they achieved, the difference between what we say is least organic and most organic. So how much of their growth was organic versus non-organic growth, okay? And what we see is that the top performers actually have all of their business, the biggest gains are through what we call organic growth. So we know that the firms that are performing the best are the ones that are achieving this organic growth in the marketplace. And this is exactly what we were talking about a minute ago. With all this competition out there, who is doing the best? Who's actually winning the business? And what it is these companies that really are achieving this organic growth. So I want to take a few minutes to talk today about something very important for us, which is how has the COVID-19 crisis actually impacted marketing? So we have some really cool data on this that I want to share with you. Duke University, through a researcher, her name is Christine Moorman, professor there, does a survey on a regular basis called the Chief Marketing Officer Survey, where they go out to the very top marketing officers of all kinds of different companies, and they ask them information about how they're performing and how they're doing. And she reports this information back, and we have some recent data from this that would give us some insights in what's happening to marketing during the COVID crisis. So I want to take a minute and talk about some of those trends that will be very relevant to us as we go through things this semester. So when we see who's engaged in the survey, what we see is there's a vast array of sectors. So we see lots of them ranging anywhere. The primary people that are involved in the survey are chief marketing officers from technology, banking, and retail. But we also see education companies, energy and mining. So it's across the board, lots of different companies. But what was surveyed were 274 chief marketing officers. So very top marketing officers of companies were asked, what are they doing? And so let's look at some of the insights that they found. One of the first things that they looked at is this is across time. And what we see here is these are trends across time in how optimistic are you about the overall US economy from 0 to 100, with 0 being least optimistic and 100 being most optimistic. We look at the lowest point about the US economy being February 09. Now, if we remember February 09, I told you that's the economic crisis. I mean, the financial crisis. That's when we had collapse of our financial institutions in the United States and globally. And what that was, a lot of the financial markets collapsed. And if you don't know about this, I would self-educate and learn about the financial crisis of 09, 010. And the recovery into 2010. So 2009, 2010 is when the recovery period started. But when that financial crisis hit, we hit an all-time low in optimism about the US economy. And what we see is we were gaining, and then during the COVID crisis from before COVID, and we see this as pre-COVID, to this year, we actually see a substantial drop in optimism. But you know what? The interesting thing is it's not the level of drop that we might have expected. So, and that I think is reflected somewhat in the stock market as well. So companies are seeing optimism as we come out of the recession crisis. But what we're seeing is it is coming down to what we call Great Recession levels. And it's a very scary time period for many companies. But let's talk about how they're reacting to this. And what we see is the sector that's most affected, this is business to business and business to consumer. The most affected sector is the business consumer services sector. And those are companies that are doing services like financial services, where they're selling insurance and financial products and things like that. And that's the most affected or least optimistic sector of our economy. Now, a couple of things that we see on what they looked at, what we call consumer behavior changes. So they wanted to see what are some of the changes that companies are seeing in the way customers are buying out there in the marketplace. So one of the things that they saw during the COVID crisis is, and this is not unexpected, is that there's an increased value placed on digital experiences. So people are really looking to the internet to be able to make their purchases and to educate themselves and to learn. So we're actually seeing quite an acceleration in social media, as well as utilization of digital tools for shopping and picking of products. Probably not surprising to you, but that's realized in the data. The next is what we're seeing is new customers have been attracted to products and services. So we're seeing actually some new innovation into the marketplace where companies are starting to still look at increasing the output of their new products, and consumers are looking for new products. And what we're seeing is some matchups. So new customers are coming out there into the marketplace and buying in some categories. The next is we're seeing a greater acknowledgement of companies attempting to do good. So we see a lot of companies really trying to help others in the marketplace. And this is a trend we're actually seeing out there where companies are actually trying to do things to benefit the consumer, to build well-being, so that when the COVID crisis is over, people will remember that that firm helped me out or did something nice for me. And so we're seeing that as an intention of many chief marketing officers, that they're trying to do things to improve the lives of their customers downstream so that they can sustain relationships with people. And then lastly, an unwillingness to pay full price. So we're experiencing significant price reductions, and a lot of companies are giving these price reductions because of the financial challenges that are out there in the marketplace. But these are some of the expectations or things that we're seeing in the marketplace right now from a consumer perspective. One of the next things that's interesting we see is we're seeing we saw during the pandemic itself, and at the height of it, a 17.8% loss in sales during the pandemic. So this is across industries. So we're seeing that most companies are experiencing almost a 20% loss in their sales revenue. But one of the things they're expecting is they're actually expecting a rebound and a 4.2% growth next year. So they're expecting us to be lifted out of the pandemic starting in mid to late next year and starting to see actual revenue growth in the next time period, which is really interesting because that's actually a very positive speculation by many organizations. The next thing we're seeing is the marketing budgets of many firms have actually reached the highest level during the pandemic that they have historically. This is really interesting. So, and this is consistent with what we see in a lot of times during business contraction periods, is that companies spend more money trying to attract customers, because what happens is the competition becomes even more difficult for the dollar because their consumers have less to spend out there. So companies have to spend more money trying to market to them or to get information out there. And one of the things that we're seeing is that this is the highest level of spend that we have historically that we see out there in the marketplace. So what percentage of your firm's overall budget goes to marketing? We see it, it's the highest level. Marketing expenses account for what percentage of the firm's revenue? Look at that, very high level. So what we're seeing is that marketing is even playing a more important role during the pandemic for many firms. This one is also interesting, social media spending. So the amount on the social media marketing that's being spent has increased substantially. Look at this jump. It was hovering around the anywhere from 11 to 13%, and now we're at something like 23%, 24% spend of the total spend in marketing is being spent on social media. Why is that? Because firms think that that's the way to reach customers now, because people aren't out and about during the pandemic. So they have to get them through social media marketing, and which means that that's even more important at this point in time. One of the last things I wanted to show you on it is we talked about organic growth. All the data continues to show that the number one most dominant focus that firms are focusing on in the next year continues to be organic growth. So organic growth continues to dominate most companies as the major thing for next year. So if we look at this organic growth on internal resources, it continues to be by far the number one focal thing that companies are focused on. So we're going to be still talking about that going forward. It's become a strategic initiative for firms really thinking forward. So this organic growth is very important for firms in achieving this. Now, I want to do one last thing, and I want to show you a quick video that I think is pretty interesting to give us some insights on the COVID-19 global business crisis. So this is an interesting video that I found. I want to share this with you, and then I'll talk about it briefly before we close out our session today. So let me shift over to the video a second for us, and then we can then look at what's going on. All right.
The coronavirus pandemic has sent the global economy into a tailspin. Although it's hard to see the full picture of just how badly it has been damaged, the clearest evidence comes with job loss numbers and the mass closure of both big and small businesses. This includes companies filing for bankruptcy, closing doors temporarily, or even laying off employees. In Canada, the COVID-19 Economic Response Plan for businesses includes a 75% wage subsidy, as well as rent relief for small and medium-sized businesses. In the US, the Senate passed a $484 billion coronavirus relief package, with 1/5 of the funding dedicated to small businesses. But even with the financial assistance from governments, will it be enough to help save a business during this pandemic?
I think there are a couple of things that are really crucial to whether we think these businesses are going to survive or not. And the first is money or access to deep pockets, capitalization. So the real question is, can you survive a shutdown, which is mandated by public health, and will you have enough money to carry you through that shutdown? So I think absolutely it's more likely if you're a bigger company that you will have that money, but that's not the only factor.
Block says another big factor is how your business was doing before the pandemic.
And so, for example, we've been seeing some news of potential bankruptcies for very large retailers, right? So if you were on the brink, then this pandemic could definitely push you over.
In order to stay afloat, companies have pivoted to selling their products and services online.
Yeah, what we're seeing is that companies that were already well established in the e-commerce space have had a definite edge during the pandemic. You know, they already had the infrastructure in place. Think of Amazon for books versus the neighborhood bookstore. You know, Amazon already has the distribution network, whereas the neighborhood bookstore, they have to develop that ability to service their customers online. And if you think even about grocery stores that had e-commerce operations in place, they're simply being flooded with so much more demand than they've ever had to deal with before.
But even if you can reach consumers, it doesn't mean they'll be spending money.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs comes to mind. So this is the sort of pyramid that explains what people, what sort of needs people need to fulfill initially before they can get to sort of higher order needs.
That means things like food, water, and shelter, followed by employment and property. So the idea of spending money on the latest gadget might not be in the books for some. Other businesses hit badly are ones which rely on large crowd gatherings or in-face interactions between the consumer and provider, such as barbershops, concerts, movie theaters, and tourism. But not all is lost.
It's never been easier to conduct business online. That's the great thing.
That's Isabel Pavot. She helps organizations understand the principles of the digital economy and helps them to get to the next stage of growth.
Yes, people are hanging on to their money, but there are a lot of people that are business as usual that are still having a salary and that are still spending money. I think what has made certain businesses thrive in a time of exponential change has always been their ability to adapt and innovate quickly. And respond to market demand. I think gyms have really, my gym in particular, has really risen to the challenge of having, moving everything to online, and now has actually developed a business model with that.
So when this pandemic is all said and done, will the businesses that took a major hit ever recover?
I think one thing will remain: experiences. People will still want experiences, especially after this. So yes, things like tourism and travel and cruise ships and all that are going to take a big hit because we know how long this is going to last. But I think people are going to be creating experiences.
So I think it's really the human cost that concerned me, because the kind of heartlessness of economists knows that, one business closes and another one will open up. But really, it's the human angle of what happens to those people who have lost their livelihood. What happens to those people who have to put their health at risk to continue to earn a living, and that's more that what keeps me up at night.
Thanks for watching.
Okay, so that gives us a little bit of an idea, and I think that was actually a really useful video in thinking a little bit about how are different businesses affected and where are they going to have sustained effects in the economy itself following the virus and when we actually start to come out of the virus. Well, some of the data is actually showing that that we are likely to mid-year next year to 2022 be a time period where we start to fully come out of issues with it, depending on the validity and usefulness of the vaccines. It's looking like the first vaccines will be coming to market right in the November time period of this year, and that's for emergency utilization, but won't be widely distributed until probably Q2 of next year. And so we should see by Q3 to Q4 of next year almost a full utilization and recovery in the economy, and going into 2022. So it won't be until 2022 that we see a full rebound from this. So I hope this information was valuable to you, and I look forward to continuing to work with you throughout the semester this year to talk about all of these things. So one of the things that this is a preliminary one, so it's not associated with a particular chapter in our book. I just gave this as an initial session to really get everybody an understanding of business trends out there in the marketplace. And I hope you found this valuable. Next session we do will be based on chapter 1. And the expectation is that you actually have read chapter 1. It's very important for you to get your book and read chapter 1 and then watch that video for chapter 1 that I'm going to be posting for next session. But thank you very much, and I hope everyone's safe, and take care, everybody.